for me, what I want is truth. And I think when you get to the truth of stuff, you understand that we feel a full range of emotions for a reason. Only seeing the good in people will get you hurt in the end.
Yes, people, welcome back to the podcast. Phenomenal episode for you today with Josh Connolly. Please hit that subscribe button. A significant amount of people who watch this channel do not subscribe. If you do not, and this continues to happen, then who knows where the podcasting journey will end. So please, if you're finding this valuable and you want more of these conversations online, then please hit that subscribe button. Enjoy the podcast with Josh Connolly. Right, man. Let's go.
Let's do it.
How we doing?
I'm good, man.
Yeah?
I'm good. And I'm excited to be here like this, man. Yeah.
Feels good.
It's the best podcast setup I've ever
Oh,
done.
really?
Yeah.
It's better than Yogi's.
Yeah, they use the same studio as me, Yogi.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, do they?
Yeah.
realise.
So this is better than that.
Yeah,
for
yeah.
me, yeah.
Yeah, there's just to give people context who aren't watching, obviously we sat in my van, so I started recording podcasts out of the van. Did one yesterday, one today with you, Josh. And it's like an opportunity, I feel.
Is this new doing it like this?
It's new, yeah. I mean, I've only been living in the van for a couple of months.
Wow.
So it's all new. It's a window into a different way of living, you know.
Yeah.
But I'd like people to experience that vicariously, you know, in a way. It's just another opportunity I can share and I guess speak to just what's alive in me.
Yeah.
And then whoever that resonates with.
Yeah, and it's interesting because obviously you mentioned what you were doing online, and I am a bit of a sort of scatterbrain anyway, right? I don't take information in very well unless I'm fully engrossed in it, right? So I didn't really get a hold of what you were doing, even though you'd sort of told me.
Mm-hmm.
And then you turn up here and you're like, wow, this is good, man. This is good.
It's the best setup for a podcast you've had today.
It is best setup, yeah, definitely, mate, definitely.
Yeah, man. So yeah, let's get into it because I've got many questions, but we'll let the conversation just flow.
Yeah,
that's what makes for the best. Like it's the first time we've connected really in person, and man, you're busy. You're busy at the moment. I can tell.
Yeah.
You know, looking through your channel and what's coming up and where you've been at, and it's exciting. I feel like how does that feel for you right now, and where that's kind of come from, I guess. So maybe give some background to your journey thus far. And
so I left my job like nearly 5 years ago now, I think, to do this, right? And that was like born out of my own personal experience, like the struggles that I had throughout my life. And then I started to realize that there was like some value in the things that I was learning about myself. Because I got sober 10 years ago, right? It's just over 10 years ago. So when I was 24 when I got sober, it's quite a different world now, right? Like to what it was 10 years. There was no real like visible sober communities, right? People at 24 were not going sober for health reasons or anything like that. So, and people weren't, actually it's unfair to say people weren't working on themselves, but it wasn't a space in the way that it is now. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so when it started like becoming like more of a, I guess, mainstream space, like, or more like into the sort of public consciousness, I was already like 5 years deep into the journey. Do you know what I mean?
Okay. So what sort of stuff were you consuming then, like learning about, and like were you on a spiritual path or connecting with just, you know, self-development and learning about your childhood upbringing and how that impacts things? And
all of it. In the first 5 years, all of it. So I went to AA first. So I was doing like 12-step fellowships. And then like, I think, so that was in 2012. Then I had like a real sort of spiritual, what I would call like a spiritual awakening, yeah. When I went from not knowing anything to being awake. And I had what were like some quite big sort of spiritual experiences then that were so big that I've not really talked much about this stuff. That were so big that like I thought like I must have found some sort of religion. So I became convinced that I needed to be religious, right? Because again, there was, or like the spiritual stuff, I couldn't find anything out there where people were talking about the things that made sense to me. So I did uh, I did like about 8 or 9 months in a Christian, like New Age Christian church, um, and really went down that path, and then found that that wasn't like the path for me for whatever reason in the end. And I was reading the Bible a lot. I was reading a lot of like Hinduism, Sikhism, like just all of like really spiritual texts. Um, but I realized in the end that I liked all of them, yeah. And the problem that I had with all of them is that they kind of wanted you to be just that one, yeah. So that was my experience of that. So now we're like into like 2 or 3 years sober, and alongside all of that, I'd always been because I found the COA, which is the charity that I'm an ambassador for that support children affected by parents drinking, right? So I found that when I was like a year sober. So then I was actively exploring childhood stuff and exploring like the impacts of my dad who died when I was 9. And I think, do you know a guy called John Bradshaw?
No.
So he's like, does a lot around sort of toxic shame. He was like, I think he got quite big in America in like the 80s. So I got quite into his work, which was the first time that I'd got into work that wasn't like spiritually led necessarily, and was a lot more like grounded and trauma focused stuff. Yeah,
the human experience.
The human experience. Yeah.
So what were those spiritual experiences that you had then? Could you kind of explain the things you went through?
Well, the first real one I had is, so I planned to take my own life when I was 9 months sober, right? And like it was done. It wasn't like I was really strongly thinking about it. It was over, and I went to see my kids, and because I'd planned it for the first time ever in my life that I could remember at least, or be able to recall, I was like at peace, yeah. And it was the only time I'd ever been there. And I went to see my kids, and because I knew what was going to happen, I was like, I always say, the past had become irrelevant, the future was non-existent anymore. So like I was just really present with my kids.
Yeah, it's powerful.
And,
how did that feel in that moment?
Like a religious experience. Yeah, because, and I think this to be true to some degree, when you look at most spiritual texts, they're all searching for that presence, right? When you're wholly present, when you're wholly connected to yourself, you become so hyper aware of your existence, right? And everything, and how you're not separate from other people, and the influence that my children were having on me, and all of that kind of stuff. And that was what made me think, that was such a big experience that I was like, this is some sort of religious experience, and I need to find out what it is. So like that's what set me down the path of like, it's weird really, I must be religious, I just don't know what religion is yet. Because it was such a big experience. But like now I look back on that experience and see it still as like a spiritual experience, right? It was when I sort of woke up.
Absolutely.
But I don't feel like I need to necessarily in this moment connect that to anything other than it being shown the essence of my being, right? And I think in some ways the 10 years that have followed have been about finding ways, modalities and things that can bring me that again.
Yeah, it's like a glimpse, isn't it, into enlightenment, or what the undefinable word that enlightenment really is, because it's unique to everyone, I feel.
Yeah.
It's this kind of understanding of self and your place in the world, and how you relate to things. Like animals have it all the time, surely. It's like, you go spend time with some animals, they will treat you not as your persona, not as them trying to achieve or gain something from this interaction. It's purely presence with you. Yeah.
That's why people love their pets, right? That's why people, do when I could do the corporate stuff, I say to a lot of people in there, if you can't think of anybody that's a really good listener, think of your pet, right? And think of your dog. And everyone says, yeah, I talk to my dog a lot, yeah. And then when you look at why they do that, it's because the dog hears the sounds and resonates with the sounds and is present with you in all of the sounds, and then looks at you exactly the same way and loves you anyway. Do you know what I mean? And so that's because that's what we crave, is to be witnessed in all of my glory, yeah, in communion with other people. Like, I think that is like the essence of what we want and need from life, and yet it feels so hard to come by.
Due to our complex upbringings and world at the moment.
Yeah.
So what would you say were like some of the key things that you dived into and uncovered after those experiences and that time of your life? Like, what were some of the things that you uncovered that started to make more sense, and then you could live in those present moments a lot more?
Yeah. The realization and the recognition that so much of what I've struggled with in my life makes sense in the context of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what I did when I discovered that I had a problem with alcohol, right? Then that was the first time I picked up a label and said I'm an alcoholic. And what I did then, it was like start to just pin everything on that, right? Everything. You know, if I behaved badly, it was like, wow, that's because I'm an alcoholic. You know, this is what I do. Yeah.
It's crazy how normalized that is to excuse a certain behavior because you were drunk. Like,
Yeah.
like really, they're not even talking about addiction, like getting to that level, or it's literally like, what did you do last night? Oh, I was drunk.
Yeah.
Like that would never, if alcohol wasn't there, you would never be, it'd never be okay to do certain things.
Yeah.
But we do, we allow it.
Yeah. And I think sobriety in a lot of ways started to uncover the parts of myself that the alcohol awakened. Because you start to realize it wasn't the alcohol that made me do it.
Yeah.
The alcohol just allowed me to do it. I did it. Because I found like some of my behaviors that I thought I'd never do if I wasn't drunk, some of them started coming back in again in those early years. So now what? Like, what? Why am I, like, I thought that was because I was an alcoholic, yeah? And then so I had to start uncovering what I am. And I guess to come back to the original question, in the end, it's led me back to my body, right? And I think the mistake that I see, or certainly that was a mistake for me, is that I was in the beginning, I was just looking for new ways to rationalize how I felt. And what I realized is that's what I did all my life. Like, I rationalized why my dad was like he was. And I used that way of rationalizing so I can stay up in my brain, up in my logical, rational part of my head, and never have to deal with the ways that I feel. And I see so many solution-based stuff out there. There's just a nice way of doing that. Yeah? Like even medical stuff. Yeah? Even medical stuff sometimes out there. We medicalize it, then let's rationalize it. And like, if you're not careful, you're just gaslighting yourself again.
Yeah.
Right? You're just like, you're literally like saying...
We hear it so much.
Yeah, oh, that felt really bad for you. Right, let's take it and try and make a really nice story out of it.
Yeah.
So, like, that's what I did all my life. So, I think it's a big shift when you start to realize that we feel things first and then make sense of it after. So, all my shit was trapped in my body, So that's where it's led me in more recent years, is to start to work on my body and work with my body and come back to my body and start at a place of, what am I feeling here? Why don't I feel safe in my body? What's scaring me? Why am I numbing out in this way? Right? Why am I eating in this way? Why am I behaving in this way? All of that stuff. And for me, that's been about coming away from, because when you find any way of articulating something that you experience, it feels like a breakthrough moment. So another alcoholic was one example. Another example was when I found the term empath. Yeah, because then I was like, that I resonate with everything that people say about that. Yeah. So when I found it, I was like, oh my god, that's it.
You're an empath.
I'm an empath. Yeah. And then it's like, it's nothing to do with boundaries or my inability to be able to like disconnect from the way that somebody else feels and I take responsibility. I'm just an empath, yeah? But then slowly you start to realize, hang on a minute, man, this is making me powerless. Like, surely there's some control over this stuff, yeah? And then that label becomes a problem for me because instead of me being curious like I was before I found the term, I just go, oh, it's because I'm an empath. I was just born this way. I'm just unlucky. I'm an empath. And then you start to go, nah, let me go deeper. Let me find out. And then inevitably what I find in the end is that the label that I've picked up loses like any reason in my life other than perhaps to, and this is just my experience, but other than to perhaps name a few set of experiences that I've had. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that I think being an empath's a bad word or you shouldn't use it. I resonate with everything that people say.
Yeah.
I just don't think that I popped out as a baby as an empath. I think I had a high level of sensitivity when I was born.
Yeah.
But I think the rest of it is there for a reason. It's happened for a reason. It's a response. And if I can figure out what that is, I wish I could say that stopped it happening. But I can at least find compassion when it does because I think, okay, this makes sense.
Yeah, that's powerful. Do you think there's a room for labels, and when are they useful, and when do they start to become unhealthy? Is it because we categorize things, right? We put things in boxes and to understand the world in a way, like it's a spectrum of that.
Yeah.
When can it be? When can we recognize that it's really not useful anymore? Because people do it with they're clumsy, or then they really identify with someone who's clumsy.
Yeah.
And then you're manifesting your own demise in a way.
Yeah. So like, I think, when we got here, I was saying to you, I'm a scatterbrain, right? I'm a scatterbrain. I can't, so in that case, it's useful,
Sure.
right? Because otherwise we've got to have a deep conversation where I go, my brain scattered when I was younger because that made sense for me, right? So I'm not going to say that to you. Like, for me to label it there and say I'm a scatterbrain,
Yeah.
right? It's useful because it helps me in terms of that conversation.
Contextual.
If, I start not doing anything for that and I think, I was born like that, there's nothing to do about it, then I think that's problematic. And so what came into my head when you asked me if I felt like there's a place for them, like, I do think there's a place for them, right? But I feel like they're more of like a base camp on your journey. If you're like climbing a mountain, you get to the next section. My first little bit that I reached was the alcoholic. Oh, I'm an alcoholic. And I get to set up camp there a little bit and explore Camp Alcoholic, and it's safe and I'm all right here, yeah. But eventually I need to gather my shit and go and start climbing again, yeah. I can't stay here at just being an alcoholic, or I could if I wanted to, and many people I'm sure do, right, and never need to jump and never need to go on, and it's safe there for them. I don't know, my personality is after a while I need to go on, so I need to leave this camp and I need to go to the next one, and maybe the next ledge for me was empath, right? And then I get here and it's safe here and I get to explore what it's like here. But sooner or later I get restless and I'm like, nah, there's more. There has to be more. And then I go on to the next one. So I do think that there's use in them, yeah. There's use in all of them. I think it's just we have to be that's why I always say a label is useful to label a certain set of behaviors or experiences, but it's not, because what we do is we treat it like you would if you said you got like diabetes, right? Which is different, isn't it? Because if you say you've got diabetes, like there is something physical there, yeah. You've got like blood sugar levels, and it's something that you have to treat in that way. When we're talking about human emotional experiences, for me, they're not the same, because there's no out. And you might have heard a lot of people. I think Gabor Mate's been talking about it recently, but it's something that I've heard previously to him talking about it. But this loop that we get caught in when it's emotional things, which is like with depression, for example. How do you know you've got depression? Well, I feel down all the time. Well, why do you feel down all the time? Because I've got depression. So you see, there's just a loop. Whereas like diabetes, it's like I feel, and I'm making these symptoms up, but I feel faint a lot. So I go to the doctors and they go, oh, that sounds like diabetes, right? And then they do a test, and then the test shows that there's low blood sugar levels, and it's the low blood sugar levels that prove that I have diabetes, and then I know where I'm at. And you see, that's different to the emotional experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the analogy of the base camp.
Yeah.
Because it puts it in such an interesting way because you can keep going up the mountain, or you can turn back, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But staying where you are in a way is it can be, yeah, it can be your safe. What do you think to like even the label of parent? Because I think that can be problematic at times. You know, I was talking about this yesterday with someone, and it was like the label of parent. Like, you look in the natural world, like there is no word for parent. Like they have guides and elders and you know, I guess certain of your kind that are guiding you and clearly have more experience and can walk in a certain way or whatever. But
Yeah.
it's like, because at some point, well, in our species, we just adopt that parent. And I don't know, I'm not a parent, but I imagine it's like it continues, and that's what we've done to that label, that it stays with you, and you always feel like responsible, or the one that needs to perhaps constantly show up for your
Yeah.
child. And it's like, well, you did for a period of time, but perhaps that label's not serving you now. You know, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, look, I think you're right, and I think this is the problem. I think if you get to any level of when you start going deep on stuff, yeah, you can pull everything apart, can't you? And you can go, well, that, like, and then because there is a, without sounding too out there, there's a life beyond the words.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? There's a real life beyond words. Words is just an attempt to try and make sense of our experience, and when you have a deep experience, you'll get lost for words. You know what I mean? Like you won't be able to describe it because
Yeah,
words won't. And I think that's why I don't talk too. That's why I don't talk a great deal about my spiritual
I
experience
think you're right
and my
too.
spiritual life is because
Yeah,
um, I just do it a complete disservice, and it doesn't sort of make
yeah.
sense.
It's like taking a couple of grams of mushrooms and trying to talk to people who aren't have zero understanding, and you to a point don't, but
Yeah,
you're still trying to make sense of that experience, and it's just somewhat impossible.
yeah, yeah. And but because what we do is then the problem with the rational brain, yeah, is we take a label like parent, and then we sort of work back from it, and then a lot of the stuff I do online is about who people who happen to have given birth to somebody or been part of giving birth to somebody,
Hmm.
yeah, and then think that just because they're the parent, they get to do whatever they want, and society will tell you to accept abuse from nobody unless it's your mum and dad, and then they expect you to accept it just because of the label mum or dad, yeah. So like if I said to you, um, I'm in this relationship with somebody and they're just abusive to me all of the time. They're emotionally horrible and they make me feel like I'm crazy and they gaslight and I question my existence whenever I'm around them. Every man and their dog would say, would you just get rid of that? But don't have them in your life. But if you then say, oh, it's my mum, they'd go, wow, think about it,
See it
maybe it's
from
not
their
her
side.
fault. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it just like it wouldn't happen with any abuse from anyone else. And yet because of this term parent, for some reason, or many reasons, I'd imagine, people find it really difficult.
Mm. Yeah, I'm glad we landed here because I think it's one thing that I hear about. What I hear about from you a lot. Do you think it's hitting hard from people the way you're saying it and how you're communicating that message, that understanding of? Because I've listened to books and how to deal with emotionally immature parents, and
Mm.
going on this journey, which resources and understanding of like technology and like how we can really educate ourselves about certain things is just because it wasn't really a thing previous generations. So like I've dived in, but when you talk about it, it's just very hard hitting, very clear, and I'm sure you've got that feedback from a lot of people.
Yeah,
Do you think it's one of
yeah,
those things that's really resonating and
yeah.
for a lot of people?
Because I think what happens is, uh, there's this like underlying belief that, like, if they're your parents, if you are enlightened or spiritual, yeah, then you'll find forgiveness and you'll be able to let them be in your life.
Hmm.
And I don't like. I've met some really, really nasty people who I don't want in my life because they're nasty, right? And if that was your parent, I just don't understand why we would force someone to keep them in their life. Like why? Like why would we do that?
Because blood is thicker than water.
Yeah, exactly, right? Because we've come up with these constructs
Yeah.
of, and I get it. I get it.
Baz Luhrmann said, I think it's the most like your siblings.
Yeah,
Hold on to them. It's the best link to your past and the most likely people to stick with you in the future.
yeah.
But it's like, it's not the case, is it?
Well, not if they're abusive, is it? Do you know, and this is like another, one of the things that people always say to me is, yeah, but like, you need to understand that these parents are, they're like that because of their own trauma. And I'm like, all right, well, yeah, I probably agree with you. Like, look, is anybody ever born nasty and horrible? I don't know. Like, I'm not sure, man. I know, like, the spiritual answer is to say no.
Or maybe it's not, because some spiritual beliefs are like, if you're being passed on ancestral
Yeah,
lineage, or you're reborn, like what you've done in that past life, the karma that you had comes into
exactly.
this life. So it's a weird grey area. I think I side with the no. I
Yeah,
don't think Hitler as a baby was like, when you look at a baby, you don't see them as evil. It's just not possible.
no,
But I think there is some predisposition of some energy, vibration, or whatever they're
yeah,
picking up on that
yeah.
does put them in a category, let's say.
And where I was going with it is actually in the end, it's irrelevant. Like, it's literally irrelevant. Like, and the way that I try and bring that to light, the fact that it's irrelevant, is would you go up to somebody, and I'm going to go a bit extreme here, but would you go up to somebody whose children had something terrible happen to them by a paedophile and go, yeah, but that paedophile's probably like that because of their life experiences? No, you wouldn't dream of doing that, would you? Because it's irrelevant. Like, it's irrelevant.
The spiritual aspect to me wants to.
The spiritual aspect wants to. No, and you can.
It's
And you can.
but you wouldn't. You
And
just
can.
wouldn't
Well,
do it.
one in that situation you wouldn't. Now, as an outsider looking in, you might, right? And so, if you've got a toxic parent, could it be useful to see why they're like it? Yeah, it might be. If you feel like you can get to that place, it might be. Doesn't mean you should change your boundaries or allow them in your life. Take the paedophile. You might be able to, if you did some deep work, you might be able to go. You might reach forgiveness for them, right? If you went deep on work, you might be. But you ain't leaving them alone with your kids again. Do you know what I mean? So
Absolutely, yeah.
I think this is the thing. I don't know if you watch much Netflix, but there's the series has been on about Jeffrey Dahmer. You know that
I've
one?
not seen it. No.
So Jeffrey Dahmer, basically, he was around in like the 80s. He was a serial killer. He was killing people, and like doing really bad stuff to them, really, really bad. Now the Netflix documentary, what it does really, really well is tells you go along with his story, and he ends up getting killed in prison. It's a true story. He gets killed in prison by somebody because they find out what he's done, and you feel a sense of sorrow for him. Because what you see is this journey of this man who he wanted to desperately stop, according to this documentary. He desperately wanted to stop. He hated the ways that he was.
Joker, right?
Yeah.
The film, yeah.
Yeah, and so you feel, at the end of it, a sense of sorrow and compassion for this guy. And, alongside that, like if he was still alive, you'd never want him out of prison or near anybody. And so, like, I think for me, what I want is truth, and I think when you get to the truth of stuff, you understand that we feel a full range of emotions for a reason, and this is what I say to people: only seeing the good in people will get you hurt in the end. Like, it's great if you can always see the good in people, but you better see the bad in them as well. Because I lived a life where I only saw the good in people.
Okay.
And I had people in my life that would, like, I've had friends in the past who, like, made me feel awful all of the time. But because I thought, no, they're cool, they're a good person, I let them in my life. And I don't know, but my life experiences has led me to a place where I think I don't have time for that anymore. I don't want people in that are doing that to me.
Do you think you can see the good in people and focus on that, but also set your boundaries and your needs straight? Or does that come with, no, I need to notice the bad. You know, I need to be aware of that as well. I can't just focus on one aspect of them. If certain aspects are hurting me. I interrupt this podcast not for an advert, but to let you know that audio quality from this point on is not so good. It's not up to my normal standards. I always endeavour to provide the best audio and video for these podcasts as I continue the journey. However, the audio recorder cut out. We had to record off one of the cameras. It's probably not as bad as I think, but please accept my apology. Enjoy the rest of the podcast. And we're back. So the Zoom recorder cut out, so we'll pick it back up from here.
Yeah.
So yeah, what were we talking? We were in a bit of a rabbit hole, weren't we?
We were in a rabbit hole, and I think
maybe it was a sign that we needed to come out.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe. I mean, I know that what the one thing that I just want to finish that piece on saying is when you think about because what I was saying is that we all have good and bad in us, right? And I think some of us probably perhaps have a bit more bad in us, and that's not our fault, and we're working on it and all that. Or even if we're not working on it, we have our good sides as well, right? The people that I'm talking about, like, I think if you find like a covert narcissist, right? And I think, like, if you've ever met and known one, like, I genuinely, and I would argue with anybody, if it is actually one of them, then I think your only option is to get away from them, because there's nothing there for you. There's no good to be found. None. Like zero.
The thing is, what tends to happen is a lot of this stuff we're talking about operates on a very subconscious level, as you know. So it's almost, how do we navigate these things when we're somewhat justifying them to ourselves consciously?
Yeah.
But then there's lots of unconscious things that are happening, which is why you're there in the first place.
Yeah.
Is why you're there in that relationship or in that space with someone that you're kind of manifesting certain things that you. It's what learning about that kind of upbringing and how your needs were or weren't met as a kid, and then what happens in the future when you get into relationships, man or women or just friends, and like, because I feel all of our relationships it's a lot is based around our ego and our personality and what we can somewhat what we're kind of getting from it, but in a way to soothe ourselves.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So as a lot of that's unconscious, like what's the real like take home for people who can really start to like understand, like, is it just in my head, or am I in a relationship that's
yeah, you know? It's hard, but it's hard because I think once you wake up and you see it, like, and you know, I've done quite a lot. What part of the work that I've done on myself woke me up to it, I don't know, but once I woke up to it and I saw it, I can see it, and I'm now very.
And there's no doubt in situations, because that's the thing. A lot of people doubt whether the person's being truthful or not. As I say, you're asking someone about a situation because there's an energy. There's something not quite right there. That didn't feel quite right. That you didn't answer straight away, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And there's a shift, and you're like, okay, I've noticed something there. Like, can you talk to me about that? And they can't. Maybe they're not self-aware. They have no idea what they're doing. But you sense something's off.
Yeah.
In a friendship relationship, and then it's like, okay, is it me or is it them?
Yeah.
Like, how do I get to the root of understanding that? I think the more work you do, the more you can pull out. We call them red flags, or those certain things early on. And
you hone it quite quickly, right? And then it becomes that subconscious thing that that you just know about, right? I just know relatively quickly now. I do everything I do is on how somebody makes me feel, and I actually, and I don't know how healthy it is, but I'm very guarded with everyone until I've been around them and got a sense of how they feel, to the point of now, like, because sometimes it comes, you have a realization, oh my god, this person's one of them, yeah. Like one of, and you're like, oh my god, how did I picked that up really slowly. It took me a little while to get there. But again, like, you know, is it you or is it me? I think it's irrelevant. And you said something earlier about, like, no other animals would do that. No other animals would think, is this me or you? If there's a feeling there and it's not a good one, like, what am I doing? Why am I here? What, you know, why am I allowing this? Why am I allowing somebody to make me feel this way, right? Or why am I allowing myself to be in a relationship where I make myself feel this way? Like, in some ways it's irrelevant. Unless, you know, like, I guess it becomes quite different if I look at my own marriage, for example. Then, you know, there's things that you have to navigate there, and you won't be with someone for the rest of your life if you don't navigate and change and look for answers.
Yeah, like, say if you're too consumed with something over here and you're not doing enough to make the person feel safe, you know, that can produce certain things that pushes them away, and then they perhaps start behaving in a certain way that is because they don't feel safe, and you're not taking accountability for that, you know.
Yeah. And I think every relationship's like that. I think every relationship is messy because we're messy, and so trying to come together in that way is going to be messy. So I don't think we should lose sight of that. However, I think when you come across, you know, online, I call them toxic people, because I just think you know, they're like a subcategory of people. They exist for whatever reason. They exist, and I think if you're dealing with someone like that,
do you ever coach any?
What, that are like that?
Do you notice that certain traits in people, and then you're working with them, and you're like, oh, you're one of them. You're that
I mean, look, I don't do much one-to-one stuff anymore, if any, because I don't have time. But like, even when I did, I would have a session first to check if the energy was there, and even if it was a bit off, then I wouldn't do it. But I'll have it in group sessions. Yeah, man, yeah. Like, especially the corporate stuff. When you wake up, you can spot them a mile off. I promise you. That sounds really crazy, right? And I don't know how much experience you have with that kind of thing. But yeah, there are people who, even on Zoom calls, mate, I can think, oh no, I don't like this. I don't like this at all. But it's hard, yeah, because you can't put, like, I can, and I say, you know, people that know me well, I'll say, I don't like that person. No, I don't like them at all. I won't go anywhere near them. And they're like, why? And I'm like, I don't know. I've only met them once, but the energy I got, and look again, that, you know, again, I would say, that doesn't mean that they're a horrible person necessarily. It might just mean that my energy doesn't like theirs, but the semantics of it.
Or would you say to someone who challenged that and was like, well, they need more love than anyone?
Yeah, they probably do, yeah.
But it's not going to come.
It's not going to come from me. It can come from someone who energetically it feels right to them, yeah. But what I would say is, if when we're talking about covert narcissists, you can love them all you want. It won't work. Honestly, and I think it's really sad, right? I think it's really sad, and you know, I can know that I think somebody will never change, and have compassion for that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I can have compassion that I don't think they'll ever change, but I don't think they'll ever change. If they're a, and look, this is why I'm always careful when I say toxic person. I don't like to go to, like, we all have narcissistic tendencies, yeah. Like, when I'm not in a good mood, I'm as much of a raging narcissist as anybody. Yeah, when I'm not in a good, you know, when I'm emotionally full and I'm overwhelmed, like, I know my tendencies can be narcissistic, right? And maybe because I have so many of them traits, maybe that's one of the reasons why I feel like I can spot them, yeah. But I do think that's different to somebody who is a proper covert narcissist, or just narcissist, yeah. And I don't know if you'll ever change them, and maybe I'm wrong, but I'm not the one that's going to stick around and try.
Yeah, and I think that, like, I respect you for that.
Yeah.
Like, more than anything, because you know who you are, you know who you're not.
Yeah.
You know you're not trying to be. You're not trying to be anyone to be seen. A lot of our, and I notice this within me. It's like, I want to be. It's what's the word? It's like virtue signaling. I want to be seen as the person who gives them love, even though they don't deserve it.
Yeah.
Because that says something about me. When really, probably what's good for the situation in me is just to say what you're saying, and just be very firm with it. You know.
And I understand. Like, I totally understand what you're saying as well. And I think, like, because
it's easy to say it about someone when it's not you involved.
Yeah.
Like, for me to say that, but when I'm involved, I'm like, nah, I don't need that.
Yeah.
I'm not spending time with them, you know.
Yeah, and like that stuff's important, and for me, that becomes what real spirituality is. And when I say, you know, I've said a couple of times throughout this recording, I don't know if that's the spiritual answer to give. What I mean by that is there's like this surface level spiritual pride stuff that goes on, where we, you know, the ultimate goal is love and compassion for everybody. Yeah. So like when we feel uncomfortable, or we're in a conversation publicly like this, or we're online, there is a tendency, I know when you ask me and we're talking about, I feel awkward because I'm saying, no, well, they ain't getting it from me. And I know I'm supposed to be like love and light, but that's not my reality. And I've been, you know, I think when I first got sober, I wanted to save everybody. And I nearly drowned myself, you know. That's happened to me loads of times. So now I'm more like, there are people that I think that I can reach and make a real impact on. Well, let me just do that. And you know, and let somebody else do the other people that I know that I'll never, how much, and again, you're right, how much of that is me that can't work with them, right? And my own experiences, and you know, I've been burnt and hurt by people like that in the past, you know. So I think, yeah, look, I love how deep we've got into it, because I don't often get that deep into it with people. And I think, look, I don't think you've pulled anything apart and properly if you're not contradicting yourself in the end.
Yeah.
And almost not making sense. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I think,
yeah,
if you have that curiosity that you've clearly got, where you go, the person that I'm listening to at the moment is saying something that I don't necessarily agree with, but let me come in and look from there first, see how that feels, and then maybe question, does that make sense to you? What I'm saying?
Yeah, it does, man.
And that's what makes for proper conversation.
Yeah, it is. I love that, what you just said.
Yeah.
If you're not kind of arriving at a place where it's just a dance, it's a real dance of life. It's in the grey areas of everything.
Yeah.
Like, we all have a bias. We all have our own perspective and lens, how we see the world. It's just so, like, that is the only true thing, really.
Yeah.
That is the only truth.
Yeah.
And the more we can lean into that and understand and speak from our experience, like, that's the way I want to live, you know. Why wouldn't you want to live like that?
And that becomes childlike curiosity.
Yeah.
Because a child picks something up and thinks, do I like this or not? Oh, this is amazing, let me explore it. They don't think, can I say I love this one because I just said that I love that? They don't do that. They have a childlike curiosity where in this moment, let me explore that. And so that's where you want to be. That's the curiosity that I want, yeah, which is like, I'm wrong about everything, yeah. I don't know what's right, but I love exploring it. Do you know what I mean? And I think when you do that, then you can't be wrong, which contradicts what I just said.
Beautiful,
do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But do you know Alan Watts?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So I love what he says, that stuff, you know. You ever heard him talking about life being like a dance?
No, I haven't.
You should listen. That's what made me think of him, because he says, what does he say? I got obsessed with Alan Watts at one point.
I think everyone goes through.
Yeah, an Alan Watts phase, yeah. Who's the other guy? Alan Watts and, I'm not going to be able to remember his name, but Alan Watts says, life is like a dance. He says, a dance isn't about starting and seeing how quickly you can get to the finish. Dance is about what you do in the moment, yeah, and how you dance around in that moment. Do you know what I mean? And it's not about starting and getting to the end. It's about being in the moment and dancing in it. And I think that, you know, that is life, isn't it?
Yeah, time is an illusion.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful, man. Let's leave it there.
Yeah.
We arrived at
Mate,
a nice
I've enjoyed that. I've enjoyed that a lot, man.
Good, man. Where can people find you and what you got coming up? What you want to speak to?
So I've got my online space, which is called Breathing Space, which you can find just through my website. My website's joshconnolly.co.uk. I'm Josh_FFW on Instagram and TikTok, which is where I'm most active.
What does FFW?
Freedom from Within.
Wow.
Which, when I started doing what I did and I set up my company 5 years ago, Freedom from Within was what I named my company's Freedom from Within. Yeah, which
keep it. Change it.
Yeah, you were floating about for a name all the time, yeah? And I fall in and out of love with it, actually.
Nah, it works, man.
But yeah, man, it's there. That's what it is. Yeah.
Well, it's proof that you kind of don't need a fancy name.
No, well, I don't really
yeah.
use it apart from on my handles, and yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Nice, man. Love it.
Yeah, good man.
Grateful, mate. Thanks for making this happen. Thanks for tuning into the show. Please remember to subscribe. An incredible amount of people who watch do not subscribe, and that is the best way I can get feedback to know that these videos, these podcasts are providing value for people.